Hey everyone. For my project, I did how high-tech firms are affecting gentrification in the United States. And it's by me, Olivia Trost, for Sociology 3000, Technology and Society. Okay, so for my opening, I'm just going to give y'all a little background on this presentation. So in this presentation, I will be speaking about who started and termed gentrification, what gentrification was created for, where it was created, and how gentrification is still being used and affected today, all by high-tech firms. I will also be discussing how high-tech firms are affecting gentrification in New York City and right here also in North Carolina. I'm doing New York City because that's where it technically, when the term came out, was really happening. So that's why you'll see that. And I chose North Carolina and mostly Raleigh because I just know a lot about the area, and with the Research Triangle Park and everything, it was just a smart choice to do. Okay, and so throughout this presentation, I will also be describing some images to give to y'all, like I did in my last presentation, and a better understanding of how much these large companies, especially tech, have changed different areas. Okay, so some background info. So, what is gentrification? I know we talked about it a little in class one day, but I'm going to go ahead and give y'all the Cambridge Dictionary um, definition of it. So, according to Cambridge Dictionary, gentrification is described as the process whereby the character of a poor urban area is changed by wealthier people moving in. And so they're improving housing and attracting new businesses, typically displacing current inhabitants in the process of all that. So, who invented slash coined gentrification? So, it is this lady on the left, as you can see. That is the British sociologist Ruth Glass, who came up with the term in the 1960s. And I'm going to give y'all a little bit of background about her real quick. So, again, the term gentrification was coined in the 1960s by a British sociologist named Ruth Glass. And in the early days of this term, gentrification was only used to speak about the process of higher wealth residents, and they back then would call them the gentry, which is how we got gentrification. And moving into these gentries would move into working class neighborhoods and replacing poor residents, just kind of like how it is a lot today. It's just a little bit more intricate today. So, although this is very different compared to the United States in today's society, Ruth Glass was a sociologist born in Berlin, Germany in 1912. She was a sociologist and urban planner. Glass left Germany during the Nazi timeline, and she relocated to London to continue her studies at the London School of Economics. So by the end of the 1930s, Glass had made herself a very established social scientist of urban life. And during her time in the 40s, Glass stayed on the urban planning and development side of her career. So, joining the faculty, she did later on of the university's College of London in 1950, where she actually stayed for the rest of her academic career. And then Glass, then in the 50s and 60s, founded the UCL, which is the Center for Urban Studies, and long served as director of research for that area. And then Ruth Glass actually produced a lot of books. Obviously, she was an academic. So, in one of Ruth Glass' most influential books, London Aspects of Change, she coined the term gentrification to explain the movement and outcomes of demographic shifts within the urban environments. And Ruth Glass passed away in 1990 at the age of 77 years old. So, the reason for gentrification, or the what of this project. So, here are some social and cultural factors that I'm showing on the slides. So, there are many reasons for gentrification, including social and cultural factors such as family structure, rapid job growth, lack of housing, traffic congestion, public sector policies, and in the United States. So gentrification was needed because town and cities obviously change. They can't be the same forever. If everywhere was obviously affordable and anyone could live anywhere, then our economy would crash, unfortunately. In a capitalistic economy, we sadly need poor areas and richer areas. So I'm gonna break this down for you. So let's break down the following reasons and get a better understanding of what each topic really does. First, I'm going to start out with rapid job growth. This growth in large cities can cause gentrification quite quickly. If any company, not just a tech company, shows up in a normally underprivileged area because of cheap land, or for whatever reason, people will flock to the area, even if it's bad, to pay contractors or real estate agents to start buying up these properties to redo or completely tear down. Sometimes it is people getting these jobs with these new companies in this area, but a lot of it really comes down to a lot of investors who are just kind of have an inside scoop of what's happening, and they will then go in before the project is out to the public and just start buying up these places to literally sell land, or they'll buy, a burnt down little building for 50 grand that's foreclosed and sell it for 300. So the second thing I'm going to talk about is lack of housing. Sometimes there might not be many people living in the exact area affected, but close to that area. So gentrification can easily start in an empty couple acres of land, just like a forest that hasn't been done yet. But even in poor areas, maybe like 15 miles away, their rents could go up, or if their property values go up, they end up paying more in property taxes. So at the same time, this part of gentrification is good because you are using empty land that can now home people who, even if they do not have money, might not have had anywhere to rent or purchase. And if you're looking at the big picture, the more developers come and create housing, the more money they pay in taxes to the city or state, so that the city or state can put that extra tax money back into the community if they really wanted to. So the next thing is something smaller like traffic congestion. That doesn't necessarily mean literal traffic congestion like on the roads. So I'll be speaking a lot about instances of gentrification in New York City for this topic. And this is a very known location for traffic issues. Obviously, it is one of the largest cities in the United States. In some instances, gentrification needs to happen so that you can move people out of an area because it is simply just overpopulated. Many people might live there their whole life because relatives have in the past, and that's just a cultural thing. Or a lot of these older people have fixed rents, and it's cheap, but there's multiple people living in these areas, and so it's a safety hazard. But I know I'm obviously not from New York, but some areas of New York, I know they have fixed rents where rent for a large one bedroom can be $400 or $500 a month, which is crazy. But lastly, for this section, I'll be speaking about public sector policies. These plans, laws, and behaviors adopted by the government can be good for poor people, but usually it's to increase the economy and make more money for that area, unfortunately. So we're going to go for the location for gentrification, or the where for this assignment. So I'm going to talk about the then and the now of gentrification. Excuse me. So for the then, I said prior in the timeline for gentrification, it starts in the 1960s, or it's coined, so that's really the farthest I can talk back about it. So making its way to America from London in 1964, So during the 1970s is when America really started to notice issues with more wealthy people and companies coming into poor neighborhoods. In February of 1970, the people of Lower East Side of New York spoke and convinced the city to adopt a plan to preserve these Lower East Side buildings that these large companies were trying to buy basically out and kick everyone out. And with the riots, not riots, but peaceful protests, the many of these buildings became part of the Cooper Square Community Land Trust. And if you look at the bottom right corner of this slide, that's a real photo from the 70s when that was actually happening. And then for the now, above is a little background about the original, obviously, gentrification here in the United States. But for my main topic, I'm obviously talking about tech firms. That really has nothing to do with it in that first slide, but giving just a background. So these high-tech firms are affecting society. I'll be focusing on Raleigh, North Carolina, as I said earlier in the presentation. And as we've seen, high amounts of gentrification just in the past 5 years alone in Raleigh, North Carolina. So, as some of you may know, Apple actually bought land back in 2018 to move their headquarters out to the Research Triangle Park. And North Carolina actually gave Apple the largest incentive package in the history of the state to open a 3,000 person campus in Wake County. Following this information, Google and Microsoft have already continued to expand through Raleigh and Durham in the past 5 years. And if you look at the top right slide, it kind of shows what area of RTP Apple bought, and they will be actually putting their headquarters in RTP. Right now, construction isn't going super fast, but they obviously have still bought the land and are still working on it. And I believe they plan to be done with it in the next couple years. Okay. So for this one, it's when the high-tech firms started gentrifying. I'm going to do another then and now just to give you an idea. So for the then, tech firms have been gentrifying again since at least the 1960s, but have really taken a toll since then. A big notice of gentrification was in New York in the 1990s when wealthy white Americans started moving and renovating the city to meet what they liked, destroying not just New York City boroughs, but the culture that had been there for decades, just to be closer to the Manhattan finance jobs that were in that area. And then if you look at the now, if you look at all of New York City today, it's not just boroughs, obviously, that are having this issue. Even places like the Bronx and Brooklyn that were once lower income have now gentrified into trendy areas for people all around the world to live. Below are just some 15 of the largest tech companies that are in New York City alone or in that area. And I'm going to, excuse me, I'm going to list them out to you. So there's Adobe, which has these are just employees in New York. Adobe has 11,800 employees in New York. Nvidia has 18,100 employees. Salesforce has 29,000. VMware has 34,000. Square has 5,477 approximately. Twitter has 5,500 employees. Procore has 2,000. Wise has 2,000. SeatGeek has about 500. Dell has 165,000 employees in New York, and PayPal has 26,500. Microsoft has 182,268 employees, and Slack has the same amount of 182,268 employees averaged. And then Bloomberg has 20,000, and Cisco Systems, lastly, has around 71,000 employees. So just in those 15 companies alone in that area, you're making up about 800,000 employees who they need more than likely are not already living in that area and are relocating to the New York area for a job. So that means that almost, again, 1 million people have to find new homes just for 15 companies alone. And on this slide, I kind of showed New York City. The left side is today and the average income it's costing to live in these areas. And it's just quite crazy how much it has changed and how expensive it is there. On the right is the 90s, how much you needed to make, and that's not today. That's how much you need to make in the 1990s to be able to afford to live there. And then on the left side is the amount it's gone up in since 2020. So in 30 years, that the 78, it's gone up 78% from 53,000 to live there. Okay, so how gentrification is being used today. So this is where I'm going to talk about Raleigh now instead of New York. So gentrification in Raleigh, North Carolina, obviously it is the capital. It has, as a capital, it's going to have a very wide range of poor people to very rich people in this city. So following Charlotte, the Raleigh area has the second highest affordable housing. Raleigh is also the nation's 9th fastest gentrifying city. Many apartment buildings that have taken the government's money to help pay for affordable housing are getting less and less by the months. These same apartments are not just stopping affordable housing, but larger multifamily corporations and tech firms are offering above standard rates for this land. So basically buying people out, offering a price, and it's making people homeless, unfortunately. With larger tech companies coming into Raleigh, the housing market has actually soared between September of 2021 and September of 2022. The average rent per month has gone up $300 a month. So home increases have also went up by 14.1%, as again, these larger companies have traveled down here. I have some personal experience in this actually, just because I had an internship back in Raleigh this summer for property management, and I actually saw firsthand. I had a family come in to look at our pricing, and she was a single mother, and she literally sat at my desk and started crying because I showed her a one bedroom at the time in August was $1,900 a month. And she literally sat down, started crying, and looked at me and said, "What am I supposed to do?" Um, and basically all you can do is basically say, "I'm sorry," and try to help them find these cheaper areas. And that's exactly what I did for her, but it's just a really disheartening thing to see that. But especially since I know I've been talking about the 1990s in New York. My family moved to Raleigh in the 90s. And what used to be like a very middle class city is now not, because you have a lot of people from up north and the West Coast who are moving down because for the past decade, 15 years, everyone talks about how cheap it is down here. And with all the companies coming down here, it was just smart for those people who are making those salaries for those areas to come down here and do work from home jobs. So besides that, I have this picture in the background. That's actually a project that's going to be happening starting in 2023. They're going to start the groundwork for it. And that's actually will be in the RTP area. And that'll be right next to SAS and that kind of area, so that people can literally, if they want to live in the apartments behind, they can walk to work. They'll have breweries. Everything will be in a close distance, and it's going to be a horseshoe shape. Okay, so downtown South, I just wanted to bring this up. It technically isn't available to the public yet. I have a friend who is a geologist for this project in downtown Raleigh. It's going to be called Downtown South. What they're doing is I put these photos up here to show you kind of the areas of where it's going to be at. So downtown South is, unfortunately, to be blunt, the last kind of middle class, lower middle class areas of downtown Raleigh. It's going to be kind of by the warehouse district, just older buildings, kind of down by Dorothea Dix and the farmers market, which is empty land, and again, older, poorer areas. And what they're doing is they're looking at the groundwork right now for that, and they're going to be putting in, you see A, B, and C, multiple different sites, which is going to have housing, restaurants, breweries again. But if you see in the top left of this photo, they are having obviously concerns about affordable housing, which they are going to try to work out, but my friend said it's highly unlikely that it's just put in the PDF for what they're working on. But with how expensive and brand new these properties are going to be, it's unlikely that the people who were originally in these areas are not going to be kicked out and have to move somewhere else. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the positives and negatives of gentrification. So the positives on humanity, obviously it's a sign of economic growth. And, you know, if more nicer things are coming in, there's going to be nicer areas and all of that. So buildings and parks are going to be renovated and beautified. The reduction in crime rates will also happen, and then new culture will come in. And then I have a positive story and a negative story for each of these. So for my positive story, this one is out of New York again, just because there is so much gentrification there. So another story out of ABC News 10, New York City, where an African American woman from the Cypress Hills neighborhood has owned her home for over 12 years. And since she owns her home, her property values have increased drastically and crime has gone down significantly. With her home being worth more than she bought it for, obviously almost 3 times the amount, she can now retire if she wants to and use that extra money and sell the house to move to a quieter area and afford a nicer retirement home. And then for the negatives on society, obviously the social costs, and then the increased rent and unattainable prices for some of these areas, and then the displacement of original businesses. An example is Harlem in the early 2000s, and obviously, excuse me, obviously one of the big things is the loss of a minority population. So for my negative story for this, again, I'm going to talk about Harlem in the early 2000s. So between the 1990s and 2000s, Harlem, New York gentrified the local area to help real estate investors and city planners, in which they aimed to bring a fresher beat to Harlem with new homes and growing nightlife. Between 2000 and 2005, around 32,000 people of color moved out of Harlem, and around 25,000 wealthier white home buyers moved into multi-million-dollar homes in that area. Okay, so the positives of media depictions from gentrification. So I've already shown you above a photo of the rally in New York City during the 60s in one of the earlier slides, but in this slide I'll show you some positive depictions. So as you can see from the photo on obviously the slide, this building is run down with graffiti on it, and what it could be done is, I know in a lot of Raleigh and Charlotte buildings like this, they are not specifically tearing down these buildings, but a lot of breweries are actually keeping the original structure of them, obviously getting rid of the graffiti and again putting breweries inside so that it still has the culture and the architecture, but they're beautifying it. Okay, let's see if my video works. Hopefully it does. This video is kind of an idea, or my skit, because I didn't have a skit last time, of kind of what would happen with gentrification.
1. Hello?
Hello. I'm a large tech company, and my company has bought this land and this building, so you have nowhere to live anymore.
Well, what am I supposed to do?
You're going to have to find somewhere else to go. We're building our tech company here, so you can't live here anymore.
Well, where are we supposed to go?
Not sure. Best of luck.
Okay, so as you saw in that, that was the video for it. And then let me go to the next slide. Oh God, let's not replay that video again. Okay, so for the summary and conclusion of this, so in the conclusion, you can see that tech firms are affecting gentrification and making areas like New York City and up-and-coming cities like Raleigh more expensive every day. This process is a negative one in the sense that some have to relocate, but these companies are also bringing a lot of jobs and new ideas to the cities that were not once there before. And then Gideon's related main ideas. So I chose number 2, which is globalization, the juggernaut of modernity, is a disembedding force, meaning it disembeds the local individuals from their local areas. Our embeddedness refers to our contact/connections. The local neighborhood or hometown we are embedded, we live within. Among other things, disembedding refers to things like being displaced from your home by new developments, a loss of job, due to factory closing, structural unemployment, when an industry leaves an area or becomes obsolete due to new technology. And again, I chose this topic as it relates to the topic of gentrification in a pretty similar way. When people are forced to or have no other option but to leave their homes and lives behind because of price increases, or even losing your job because your company was offered a high price for the land their business was used on. And that is my cited sources. I hope you enjoyed my video. Thanks.